So my addiction started off as this really glamorous life, right? I had moved to New York City and I was making all this money and it was just free flowing, like bubbly and just lines of cocaine. And it was just this great life. That was how it started, right? And so many people see that lifestyle and it's like, it's everything. But what that turned into, over the course of towards the end of my addiction was the complete opposite. It was me scrounging for change to buy the fix that I needed for the day, to buy any type of alcohol I could afford, to be spending my time in places without electricity and running water, to be in parks and just completely under the bridge, like places that I felt like where I was hanging out matched how I felt inside and what I deserved. And it was the only place that I felt like I wouldn't be judged because I was surrounded by people that wouldn't judge me for how bad my life went. Yeah, and so women can't talk about that stuff, right? So it's like who am I to like tell that story, right? Because if I tell that story to somebody, they're gonna immediately judge me. So there's also that shame that I carried around with for so long. Like I can't tell people that I was hanging out in these places and I was literally hanging out in the trap house. I can't say that because then you're gonna think there's something so fucked up with me. And so many people don't see like the actual story, behind the person or how they got there. They just see them and it's like, that must have always been their life. That is just how they've always been. They're definitely broken and damaged. And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions about, seeing somebody is there's a whole story behind that person and how they got there. And the reality is like over time, as your addiction starts to become noticeable, as people start coming to you and saying things, as you start to develop more and more shame around it, you go inward, right? And you go inward and then you don't want to talk about it at all. And so I think for a woman, especially when things get really bad, it's really hard to explain that to somebody because they're like, how the fuck did that happen to you? Like, what do you mean? Like, what's wrong with you? How did you go from this life to that? And it's so much judgment behind that as opposed to an understanding that can happen to anybody.